The observation deck of the Celestial Harmony hummed with the soft vibration of faster-than-light engines, but Alara barely noticed anymore. She'd been stationed on this diplomatic vessel for 8 months now, serving as humanity's cultural liaison to the Vrexian Empire. The job description had mentioned potential challenges in cross-species communication, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of explaining human nature to a species that communicated primarily through displays of dominance and controlled aggression. The Vrexians were magnificent, creatures standing nearly 9 feet tall when fully grown, covered in iridescent scales that shifted between deep purples and midnight blues. They were apex predators on their homeworld, and their society reflected that heritage. Strength was virtue, ferocity was honor, and the ritualized combat that settled their disputes seemed utterly barbaric to most other species in the Galactic Council. Most species kept their distance from the Vrexians. Humanity, characteristically, had decided to become friends. Alara stood before a viewport overlooking the swirling colors of hyperspace, reviewing her notes on a datapad. Behind her, she heard the distinctive clicking of talons on metal flooring, a sound that still sent primitive shivers down her spine, even after all these months. Instructor Alara. The voice was high-pitched, almost musical, completely at odds with the creature's fearsome appearance. She turned to find Rook, one of the younger Vrexians aboard the ship. At only 4 years old, he was barely waist-high to Alara, though his scales already showed the promise of the brilliant coloration he'd display at maturity. His tail swished back and forth in what she'd learned to recognize as curiosity. "Hello, Rook," Alara said warmly. "What brings you to the observation deck?" "I have been thinking about yesterday's lesson," Rook said, his head tilting in that peculiar way the Vrexians had when processing complex thoughts. "You said that humans don't bite their friends. But I have been studying your entertainment files, the ones you call movies, and I have seen humans bite each other many times." Alara suppressed a smile. She should have known that giving the young Vrexians access to human media would create questions. "Those are fictional stories, Rook. They're not real. But they are based on human behavior, yes?" Rook's tail had gone still now, and several other young Vrexians had begun gathering around them. News of an impromptu lesson traveled fast among the cubs. "The elder matriarch says that all stories contain truth about the teller." "That's very wise," Alara acknowledged. She noticed that a few adult Vrexians had also paused in their duties, pretending not to listen while their ear slits swiveled in her direction. "Yes, humans can bite. We have teeth just like you do. But we choose not to use them as weapons against people we care about." Another cub, smaller than Rook and with scales still showing juvenile green patches, chirped up. "Why not? Biting is how we show affection in our clutches. Gentle bites mean family. Hard bites mean training. For humans, biting is considered aggressive," Alara explained carefully. "We show affection in other ways, hugging, holding hands, speaking kind words." Rook's eyes, large and golden with horizontal pupils, fixed on her with unsettling intensity. "But you can bite? You choose not to?" "Exactly. What about just a little?" Rook asked, and the gathered cubs chittered among themselves in what Alara had learned was Vrexian laughter. She couldn't help but laugh herself. "No, not even a little." One of the adult Vrexians, a decorated warrior named Thexal, stepped forward from where he'd been pretending to inspect a systems panel. "Forgive my intrusion, instructor, but I find myself curious as well. Among my kind, choosing not to use a natural weapon is seen as weakness. Yet humans have built one of the most formidable militaries in the known galaxy. How do you reconcile this?" This was the real question, Alara realized. Not from the cubs, but from the adults who had been watching and wondering since the first human diplomatic mission had arrived. The Vrexians respected strength above all else, but they couldn't understand a species that seemed to embrace contradiction. "May I tell you a story?" Alara asked. Thexal made a gesture that she'd learned meant assent, and the cubs immediately settled into attentive positions, their tails curling around their feet. Thousands of years ago on Earth, humans were not the dominant species. We were prey animals for many of the large predators that shared our world. We were weaker than bears, slower than lions, and we couldn't fly away from danger like birds. But we had something else. We had each other. Rook's tail twitched. "Pack behavior. We understand this. More than pack behavior," Alara continued. "We learned that our strength came from cooperation, from trust. A human alone might fall to a predator, but humans together could survive anything. So we developed rules, social bonds that went deeper than instinct. We decided that those bonds were more valuable than any individual advantage. You sacrificed personal power for collective strength, Thexal said slowly, his scales rippling with what might have been comprehension or confusion. We discovered that personal power was collective strength, Alara corrected. When I choose not to bite my friend, I'm not being weak. I'm being strong enough to control my instincts. And my friend sees this and knows they can trust me completely. That trust makes us both stronger than we could ever be alone. The cubs had gone very quiet, processing this alien concept. But what about enemies? Rook finally asked. What about those who would harm your friends? Alara's expression hardened slightly, and she saw several of the Vrexians lean forward with interest. That's when humans show what we really are. We don't bite our friends, but we will absolutely bite for them. The same restraint that lets us build trust is the same discipline that makes us so dangerous when that trust is threatened. Ah, Thexal's scales flushed a deep, approving purple. The sharpest blade is the one kept sheathed until needed. Exactly, Alara smiled. Humans have a saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. We prefer peace, but we prepare for war. We choose cooperation, but we're capable of terrible violence when necessary. The choice is what makes us strong. Rook sat back on his haunches, his young mind clearly working through the implications. So when you say we don't bite friends, you mean we won't bite friends, but we could destroy you if you become an enemy. That's a fairly accurate translation, yes, Alara admitted with a slight laugh. I think I understand now, Rook said quietly. Then his tail began swishing again, the movement playful. What about just a very little bite? As an experiment? The gathered Vrexians erupted into chittering laughter, and even Thexal's scales flickered with amusement. Alara shook her head, grinning despite herself. Not even a very little bite, Rook. As the cubs dispersed and the adults returned to their duties, Thexal lingered for a moment. Your species is strange, Instructor Alara, but I begin to understand why the Council fears and respects you in equal measure. A species that can be so gentle and so fierce and know precisely when to bewitch. His scales rippled thoughtfully. Perhaps that is the most dangerous thing of all. After he left, Alara turned back to the viewport, watching the colors of hyperspace stream past. In 6 days, they would reach the Vrexian homeworld, where she would present humanity's case for a full military alliance. The Vrexians wanted to know if humans could be trusted as brothers in arms. She thought they'd understand now. Humans didn't bite their friends, but for their friends, humans would bite through steel.